What's up, guys? We have a special edition podcast today. John, myself, and Tyler. I know. Just go with it, John. we were chatting and figured it made sense to get an accountant bookkeeper on here and kind of chat through some of the options of the PPE, the EIDL, and some of these other grants and loans that are available to help through COVID-19. So we grabbed Nicole from Landau Consulting Solutions, and we walked through a couple of the scenarios and what we're doing individually and our thoughts on how we can implement some of this structure into our business going forward. Tyler, Nicole is my accountant. She works with me, and more specifically has been helping me with this PPP, the Payroll Protection Program.
Yeah.
And I think Nicole, I'm going to let you do the talking because I probably pretend to know what you're telling me to do, and I'm just passing that information along. But the reason we're doing this, I'm going to call it the bonus episode, is, this week is because of COVID and because of coronavirus. And, I think I keep saying it is that the construction industry, and I speak for it because I'm in it, but I feel like there's such contradicting information, what the right thing to do is. Now I'm working from home where last week, I think it was last week. I don't even know what week it is, but I don't think I was. And it was, because my team wasn't working from home and I felt as though we needed to band together and I was the captain of the ship. And if the ship goes down, I go down with it. But it's like, that's not smart because I could be the guy that gives it to my guys. So we're trying to do everything we can, take the right steps. But the feedback that we've been getting is that no one in this industry really knows what the right thing to do is. And not to specifically touch on that, but to touch on what we can be doing and how we can be preparing, for normalcy.
Yeah, I feel as contractors, we're not all necessarily very proactive. So this might be a good, a little incentive for people to get the ball rolling before it's after the fact.
Right. Sounds good. Well, I will share as much as I know. There's still a lot of conflicting information that's coming out and what to do and how to do it, but ask away and I'll share what I know and what I'm seeing.
I don't know anything.
Okay, we'll start from the top.
Well, I actually do have one question because this is, I talked to my brother yesterday about it, is the forgiveness, this PPE, the Payroll Protection Program. Everyone's like, oh, just apply for it. It's free money. It's going to be forgiven anyway. And I'm like, it might not be. Like they're changing it every day. We could very well pay it. And yes, it's quote unquote cheap money at 4% or a cap at 4%. But what is it like? What does that mean? What is the, how do we determine whether or not we should be applying for that?
So I think you should still apply, and what we don't know on the back end is what's going to be required. So when it comes in at the end of what documentation, how do you show that you used it for what the guidelines were, that's still up in the air. It's kind of all over the place of what you're going to have to show. And it almost feels like, Nick, I know you've been in this position like an IRS audit. Like, what are they going to ask me and how do I protect my business to show that I actually used it the way that I should and it should be forgiven? So I think there's going to be a lot on the back end and we might see a lot of problems with it later on. But like you said, it's cheap money. Let's try and get cash in the door right now. That's what we're trying to do, is just keep the cash flow going. And so that's what I'm telling clients to apply for it. Let's get it in the door. Let's use it the way that we should, and let's document it the best that we can too. And then we'll take it as it comes on the back end.
So to dumb it down a little bit more than that, this is basically a loan that you could be taking. It's a low interest loan that you can be taking to have cash flow right now to keep your business afloat while you don't necessarily have cash flow actually coming in through the business.
Right. So it's through the SBA. It's called a PPP loan, the Payback Protection Program. And there's guidelines. If you use it for payroll, it's 75% of it that you are awarded or granted, funded, whatever, goes towards payroll. 25% of that can go towards mortgage, your rent, your utilities, and that And if you use it the way that they say you can, it will be forgiven. So it converts into a grant and you never have to repay it. What's we're uncertain about is if you don't use it on the back end the way that you were supposed to, it then turns into a loan. So then those terms are, if your business, it's 3.75% loan. So it's still fairly cheap money. I think it's a 1-year loan, 1 or 2 year loan. But right now it's money to get in to use towards payroll to keep your guys employed and keep them going.
When you say 1 or 2 year loan, that means you need to repay it in 12 or 24 months?
Right, if you don't use it the way that it's outlined to be used.
Right, so even if it's low interest, it's still, those payments aren't cheap.
Right.
If you use all of it.
Right.
What about, you said to apply for this regardless. What about, for myself, I'm a small company, so I don't necessarily need a massive amount of cash flow. What would you recommend for somebody or smaller companies who don't necessarily need the cash flow to be doing with this?
So like if you do get awarded it, if you get funded, and then
Sure.
how to apply it. So I would just hold on to it, right? So like, let's say you get funded, it comes in, you don't necessarily need it. I would use it the way that it should be for payroll, your rent, and then it's forgiven. So it's free money for you right now to help you keep going. And then if there's extra and you don't need it or you can't use it towards your payroll, pay it back, give it back.
Before, and there's other loan opportunities, but before we get into that, the other question I have is, yeah, say it's forgiven, but everyone always says nothing's ever free, right? So what does that mean, and maybe, and I don't know, because I don't know how this stuff works, but I think of like the stimulus, for the auto industry a couple years ago, like they end up paying for it somehow. So
Yep.
is it realistic to believe that if we do take this, use it as we see fit, we don't have to pay it back, it's technically free money, are we going to see some sort of implication on a future tax return?
I don't know how that's going to work. As taxpayers, is that going to be a business tax that's coming? Is that going to be on your property taxes? I don't know. But like you said, nothing's ever free. I'm sure it's coming somewhere. We will see it somewhere.
Right. So there could be a potential spike in taxes to cover all this.
Correct.
Can we use it to pay for that spike in taxes?
If you want my tax bill too, I'll send it to you.
Just a little forward thinking.
Yeah.
Well, so Tyler, as you know, the smaller company, Nicole, there's other options out there. Nice Yeti, bro. There's not other options out there than just the PPP, right?
Right. Yep. So the PPP is one. There's also through the SBA, it's called a EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan. It's a 30-year loan. Interest on that is 3.75%. To qualify for it, you have to be in business longer than a year, less than 500 employees. There's some additional requirements. You're going to have a personal guarantee on it if it's above $200,000. It's not forgiven, so then it's a true loan. But you can use it for other expenses, and it doesn't have to go towards just payroll. And then the P&I, the principal and interest payments on this can be deferred up to 4 years. So this is a true loan that the SBA is, that's been rolled out through the SBA. So this might be an option if you already have maxed lines of credit, or if you need to find additional funding that you might not normally get. This could be another option for you.
What stops someone from getting a loan like that and applying it to, I don't know, say their entire mortgage, where like it's a cheap, maybe their mortgage on their business building is 5%, and this is cheaper money, and they have a 30-year note on it. What stops them from applying to cover that entire expense just to get the cheaper money?
Why do you look at me when you say that?
Well, it can be used for anything in your business. There's no specifications. It doesn't just have to be through payroll. It can be any business expense that you have. I don't know what that's going to look like on the back end, if there's going to be regulations on it of, okay, you were negligent, or do they even care? It's a loan, we're giving it to you, you use as seen fit.
And is there, how are you qualifying for the amount? It's not, because the PPP, what's the calculation on the PPP?
So the PPP is your monthly average payroll from 2019. And there's some nuances within that, but then you times it by 2.5 times. So it's basically funding you for 2.5 months. With the PPP, once it's funded, you have to use it within 8 weeks. With the EIDL, there's not that, it's not as strict on how you have to use it, when you have to use it by.
You mentioned nuances. I think it's important to kind of talk about what those are, because we talked about that.
Yep. So when you're figuring out, and this has changed drastically, even within a week, because they rolled this out last week. SBA had their forms on last Friday, and then Monday they came out with new forms. So it's even changed within the last week. And then today, a new set. So going back, businesses could set theirs up and apply for it starting last Friday on the 3rd. And what it includes is your monthly average payroll. And within that, you take your salaries, your commissions, and it caps out at $100,000. So if you have any employee that's over $100,000, you have to adjust for that. It also includes the employer side of medical benefits, 401k matches, but not the employee side. So you take your employer cost. It also includes state income tax, state and local income tax. You cannot include the federal income tax. And then once you get to that dollar amount, you times it by 2.5 times. So that's how you get to your number.
And if we work with Gusto for our payroll, and they've actually done a really good job of kind of consolidating this information. So that would be where, if you are looking into doing this, I would start is talk to your payroll provider, because they're probably already putting these reports together. Yep. And then your accountant can help kind of facilitate it. But the other recommendation was work with your bank that you work with on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
They kind of look, in the conversation I had with my bank is they have tiers. They have people that bank with them. They have people that bank with them and have loans with them. And then they have people that don't do business with them. And the applicants that they're getting, the order of importance is based on how much business you do with them. Mm-hmm. Which, it makes sense, because they're overwhelmed. I mean, I called last Wednesday and he was like, yep, there's 33 people ahead of you. And those are just the people that I'm definitely, helping, apply for in the first round. Yeah. So are there, beyond the, I'm going to mess it up, EIDL, something? And the PPP, what else is there out there that can, that contractors should be looking at?
So there's also, whenever you apply for your EIDL, there's also a grant that's included in that, a $10,000 grant. We're seeing some back and forth. They've changed that this week. They were saying 10,000. Now they're saying up to 10,000. The way that they get to that number, nobody can figure out yet. And then they came back a couple days ago and said it's going to be $1,000 per employee. But under the EIDL, when you apply for that, you can also apply for this grant. I tell people to start with the PPP, because we're starting to see funding. When Nick and I talked about this earlier in the week of like, where are we at with our status? When are we expecting funding? It was not a good conversation to have, because we weren't seeing any funding across the board. Of like, we just have no idea. And so now we're starting to see funding, and we're seeing approval letters that are saying we're funding. I have a tax person that I work with. They had a client that received $500,000 yesterday in funding. So that's great news that it's coming. It's not, when are we going to get these stimulus checks coming? And we don't know. With the EIDL, we're not seeing funding yet, so we don't know what that timeline is. So I say start with the PPP, EIDL, still apply for it, because if you are funded with the PPP, you just subtract that amount off of the EIDL, and so that reduces your loan amount. So that's kind of the order of importance. There's also unemployment. If you do have to go down that route, Unemployment's available. The federal government is coming out with a $600 check per week for 13 weeks. So you have to weigh your options. What makes most sense for your business and which route do you want to go? There's also grants. There's nonprofits that are coming out. So there might be something that's local to your community or even to your state. I know there's grants available for women-owned businesses. So there's a lot of different options that you can check out. There's a lot of funding that's going on right now. And then I think later on, we'll start to see tax credits are coming too. They haven't talked about what that looks like or how to qualify for it, but there might be deferment on tax, payroll taxes. There's some additional things that are coming out. The other thing they've talked about this week is another round of funding for the PPP, because it's almost capped. They think they're going to run out of money, so there might be a next round. So if you don't think you should apply for it now, you're still seeing the revenue come in, you're still seeing money in the cash flow, you're able to work, you're not shut down, and you just don't need it yet. Maybe you apply for it in the second round because something has changed, because it can change very quickly over the next few weeks.
You said something about taxes. What has COVID done to tax season this year? Because we're 5 days away from the normal tax deadline. Yep. Has that changed?
It has. So they pushed it back to July 15th. The thing that they've also changed with that, so it's filing July 15th, and then also your tax payment isn't due until July 15th. So they've extended that a little bit for business owners, and I think it's individual as well.
And there's no repercussion for that. It's just, with everything going on, it just makes sense.
Yep.
To ask some ignorant questions, but where is the money coming from for all of this? And then 2, what's going to happen down the road when all of this money is out and people are either still closing up shop or defaulting on loans?
I think we're going to see the ripple effects. I think we're trying to pump money into the economy right now, keeping people going, but I think we'll see some repercussions later on. Where's the money coming? I'm sure it's coming from the taxpayers. I don't know if they're just printing money right now and we're going to be paying for it later on. I don't know that.
That's literally my vision, is that they've upped the production of dollar bills. Is that they said, you know what, we'll print more. And I wish I had the post, but someone had posted about, and I don't want to get into government, the politics of it, but it had an interesting spin on it, is that we're producing money that we don't have to give to people in efforts to stimulate the economy, but are we really just putting a Band-Aid on an open wound?
Yep. Absolutely. And are we funding businesses that shouldn't be in business? Are they so far down? Do we keep them open, or do we just say, you know what, let's shut it down, let's file for unemployment, and let's start fresh, or find something else?
I mean, realistically, we're somewhat compounding the issue. I guess it's a balance of the companies who will sustain this and the companies who will still go downhill while taking more money and spending more money, which they're just kind of magically coming up with at this point.
Right. Yep.
Nicole, we didn't get into it in the beginning, but talk to us about your background. You have a lot of knowledge in the construction industry. Why don't you explain kind of?
Definitely the youngest accountant I've ever seen.
Really? So starting from the very back, and I get a lot of pushback on this, because how I got into construction is I always thought I wanted to be an architect. So I took every CAD class, every millwork class, every building class I could take. And I was always the only female in my class. So I thought I would go to school to be an architect at some point, but then was introduced to accounting and fell in love with the numbers. And I think that goes back to like the architecture and the drawing and putting all the pieces together. So went into public accounting and had a career in internal audit, but really wanted to be the advisor again and have my own company. So I went out on my own and came back to construction because I really like construction and all the guys that I work with and all the companies, and love seeing all the amazing things they build. So now do accounting and internal audit for construction companies. So my background, accounting, internal audit, but also marrying that with construction.
With doing internal auditing and accounting for multiple construction companies, what do you see is one of the biggest mistakes we make?
So since we're talking about this PPP, I'll keep it with this topic. I think we're going to see, and I come from a fraud background too. I work fraud cases, and I think we're going to see a lot of fraud on the back end of people misappropriating and using funds where they shouldn't be. I also think from an internal audit perspective of keeping documentation, clients will have boxes of receipts or they won't have receipts. So I think they're going to really struggle with showing they received this money and where was it paid and how are they going to document that. So I think that's where this industry is going to struggle the most, is showing proof and actually getting the loans forgiven.
So documentation and using it appropriately. So
Yep.
what tips could we offer them, in the sense of documentation, or I guess misappropriating money is probably pretty intentional, so we probably can't offer them a tip to fix that, but
Don't do it. Just don't do it.
But as far as, documentation and, what would be the right approach to that?
So if you don't already have a separate bank account, let's say you have a savings and there's not much in it, I would say take everything out that's out of it and use that as a dedicated bank account for right now. Or even start a new bank account and just put all the funds in there and track where it's going. Also, when you were first and if you still haven't applied for the PPP and you're putting your documentation together of how you got to your number, because I think each bank in the beginning, we weren't sure how to calculate it, and each bank was asking for something different, is just document how you got to that number. And then on the back end too, of just showing where you're spending the money. And if it takes discipline to put it in a bank account, just do that. Just put it in a bank account and just show where it's paid. If you can do it in your accounting file, flag it, maybe set up a new class tracking and say, this is from the PPP loan. I say over document. I would rather have too much. If the bank comes back and says, I need all this documentation, I would rather have too much than not enough.
As far as documentation, and I know I've asked this question before, with everything digital now, is it required that we keep paper copies of things?
You don't need like physical paper copies, but I would keep records in wherever you store your documentation, if that's in your accounting system or if that's like a Dropbox or wherever you keep your documentation. But you don't need to have physical paper sitting somewhere.
So what would be, for somebody who's listening to this podcast or kind of has no place to start for this, would you recommend somebody go to their bookkeeper or call their normal accountant? Because I know that we're not going to cover everything on this podcast and there's still going to be questions and everything else. Who would you recommend any individual contractor call to get these questions figured out? Who's that person they should touch base with?
So if they have an internal bookkeeper, start with them. If they don't have the expertise, start with your tax firm. A lot of the tax firms are sending out guidance because there's implications on the tax side too, and they're giving guidance. So then start with your tax accountant. If you're not sure after that, the SBA website has great resources out there. They walk it through. They can also help you find your SBA lender, because not every bank is SBA approved. So if your bank's not approved, you can go out to the SBA website and there's guidance out there. It's a little challenging to get through all of it. There's a lot of guidance. It's changing, but that's where I would start.
I feel like this is very overwhelming.
It is. It is.
I'm just like, I continued to go to work and keep putting it off and putting it off. And I shouldn't be. I'm texting my wife right now. We have to look into this. And she's like, what's that? I'm like, just look it up. So that I always pawn stuff off on everyone else when it comes to this end. I'll feel like I'll have Nick sort this all out and be like, all right, what'd you do? There's John.
Hi, John.
Nice. You're good. You're golden. You're recording, right? That's all right. And I forgot to send you the link, so.
Done. Recording. I'm good.
What are the now I'm tripping over my words. What are some of the things that we shouldn't be doing? Like, I feel like we're getting plummeted with emails about, hey, watch this webinar. Oh, sign up for this. Do this. Send out that. There's a lot of information happening very quickly. And being that, even just talking about how the PPP has changed so much over the last day, week, whatever, there's got to be misinformation out there.
Oh, absolutely. And there's people that are phishing and sending emails that aren't true and having you click on websites that's not true. If you don't have I say work with your trusted advisor, somebody that you already work with that's giving you financial guidance. If you don't have that person in-house, if it's not your tax accountant that's helping you with your taxes, go to the SBA website. I know it's a lot to read, but as a business owner, be informed yourself first. Before you start getting spammed with emails and not sure if it's true, if it isn't, kind of take it in order. And who do you trust? I mean, do you have other business owners in your network that you can talk to and say, you might have more resources that are helping you. Can you give me some guidance too? So talk to people that you trust first in your circle, and don't always click on the links of the emails that are coming, because phishing emails are on the rise.
So this is the situation where you get the email where a African prince wants to give you money and you don't want to take that?
No, don't give out your social security number.
Just to be clear.
Well, it's crazy. I probably got, I don't know, a dozen like LinkedIn messages saying, hey, have you heard of this PPP Act? I can help you sign up for it.
Yep, I got those too.
I'm like, this is, and it's sad because even in our industry, we see the rise of construction sites being broken into, equipment being stolen, tools being stolen, and it's sad that in a time that the whole world is in disarray, that people are taking advantage of situations like that for their own well-being. Mm-hmm. But I mean, unfortunately, we're not going to fix that. So right. It's like looking out for those things, and I think that's good advice, is working with someone that you do trust.
Absolutely. And we saw the same thing after Hurricane Katrina. It's going to be rampant with this as well. It's just expected.
But do you you said this is going to trickle in over time, and it's, John has talked about it, and we talked about it on the last couple of episodes, is that construction is really going to be, it's 3-6 months out before we're seeing the repercussions. John, do you still feel that way? Like, especially with materials?
I mean, Marvin's already released that they're going to be a 2-week delay in all their windows, and that's kind of the buffer right now. I think they're just putting out there as a standard. Yeah, I mean, like we said before, we're ordering everything that's off the shelf that's already there, because people that aren't buying it, then they're going to shut down tons of facilities, like tile manufacturers, Kohler, all these places that have, maybe they won't shut down, they'll switch to shifts, meaning they'll be able to control if someone gets infected. They'll be able to have to downshift off of one group and be able to put another group into that space, not have an entire company working full shifts. Mm-hmm. And then if it gets infected, then they have to shut everybody down. So they'll change the way they do things, but they will be everything, like we are in construction, everything's slowing down. 2-3 subs in a house. They're going to do that for manufacturing as well. Until we get, I'm just trying to find some of the emails from my accountant. Sorry.
It's weird because I feel like everything's slowing down and it's just making way more work. It's the slowest it's been, but I feel like I'm the busiest I've been.
Well, I think that's, back to my comment earlier, we have a lot of work ready to start that we cannot start. And we have a handful of projects that we can work on, but we're delayed because there's a lot of trades that have shut down. My electrician's not going back to work until May 4th. My plumber shut down, that's not a situation where I'm not going to go get another plumber or electrician that is working, for moral reasons, but also it just doesn't make sense. But, I agree with you, Tyler. Work is slowing down, but I feel like we're the busiest that we've ever been because we're trying to keep our boat moving. Like I said, it might be easier just to shut everything down, but this is what I battle with. It's, can we just take every opportunity to do everything as safe as possible and keep us working? Hence why 3 of us are working remotely now, and the guys are, in 3 to 4 person teams, really really small groups, and we're working through technology like this and over software and things like that to stay within communication. And I think that's where that, for us, that's where the busyness comes. Our days are becoming more structured so we can make sure we're getting everything done.
Well, I've been saying it to everyone. I feel like I'm still going 1,000 miles an hour, but the world is in pause. And
Right.
it's so, like, everyone you call, it's probably the way it should be. Like, you call and you don't get an answer right away. You send an email, it's not immediate. I kind of love that, but the other part is, like, I had, like, people set up and now they're not comfortable working. So it's like that whole morning is, how do we wrap up? Today it was in Cohasset, the plumber that we had set up. He called me and was like, yeah, I'm not comfortable working anymore. And I'm like, totally respect that. And it's just, but then I have to then find somebody else that is going to do it, because this is how we're going to live for the next 2 months. So everyone's going to start crawling back to work, and they're going to have to figure this out later, how it works. I'm hoping that the testing comes out, that they can figure out if you have had it, which will save a lot of grief on site.
Nicole, what's this doing for your industry, being that you typically have a lot of customers coming to you April 15th, and now there's extensions to that?
So we don't do tax, we just do the accounting, the bookkeeping side of it.
Okay.
But we have seen, so we're 100% virtual, so we're working from home anyways, but now, like today it was hard to be flexible because now everybody has home situations that they're dealing with too. But we're seeing a huge spike in one-off projects. So I've talked to people a couple months ago of doing like software implementations and implementing Builder Trend. And so now they're saying, we're slowing down, let's do it. So we're seeing a huge spike in those like one-offs. And then also with these loans, if people don't have their books together, their 2019 books to apply for these loans, they're saying, hey, we need to get this done so we can apply for these loans. So we're seeing a huge spike. We're not slowing down at all.
Jealous, Nick? I was gonna say must be nice, but Nick hates that.
No, I'm not jealous. I mean, especially the scope of her work. I don't like that. But
So it's just as busy as always this time of year, if not more, because it's way more complicated trying to sort through this mess.
Yep, definitely.
See, I think that the most difficult part for myself and probably most people right now is there's this uncertainty. I've heard you say a couple times that things are changing day to day, week to week. And that's the issue that I think we're all having, because we're trying to project what that next move is, and whether it's lining up something else or having something in your back pocket or making sure that there's certain materials on the ground, and then the next day something changes. So I feel like a lot of what I'm doing is twice as much work logistically, and then I'm still only getting the same amount of work done.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then also with you guys, like ordering materials and making sure that's coming, like John talked about, getting things on site, like where is that coming? Are you securing it? And I think Nick talked about this too, of, the fraud of the materials being gone. So I think there's different activities that you guys are dealing with now that you normally wouldn't worry about, but since there's uncertainty and a lot of people at home, it's just, different activities, I think.
It's funny because even the cost of running your business now, everything's set off what your business has run for the past year, and that's what you're getting your loans based on. But I just feel like the cost of you running a business now is completely different than what it was 3 weeks ago.
Absolutely. And the thing that I questioned too when we were first putting these calculations together was, we're basing our payroll numbers on 2019. There's so much that has changed in Q1 of 2020 just because of normal course of business of letting people go, bringing people on. So are those 2019 numbers, are they even right? And does that help my payroll situation? I might have added more people. Is that going to be enough money? So there's, even with those numbers, we've seen some variances too.
I guess you have to have some sort of standard or benchmark to go from, and that does make the most amount of sense, but it's still, I do feel like things things have changed so rapidly that it may not actually be indicative of what your business looks like right now.
Absolutely. And even the emotional piece too. I've checked in on Nick a couple times this week of, how are we feeling? Like, what are we doing? Are we still going? And just
you texted me yesterday. All you wrote was, "How are you feeling?" And I wrote back. I was like, "In what regards?" Because there's a lot of feelings going on right now.
I know it's an emotional roller coaster every single day, but trying to keep everything together and keep your employees going, and being the emotional support for them too. It's tough.
Well, I think it's fun. It's interesting you say, a lot of people are looking at these one-off jobs and wanting to implement things. And I find myself in that position where it's like, we only have a couple projects going on. The guys are maintaining speed on those. And there's only so far I can take the projects that we have ready to go. So my focus can be on, planning for projects even further out, which is great. That's what I've always wanted to do, but also implement some of the things that we've wanted to do, our entire, since starting our business, having, bringing more things online, or creating standard operating procedures for the way we write an estimate or the way we onboard a subcontractor. That's what, I'm seeing a spike in, amongst who I talk to, is that they're all taking this time to actually, focus on the business for a change, which I think, my opinion is, if you have that opportunity or you do get shut down, is to, like John said, this isn't a vacation. This is a time where you refine your process in one way or the other, and you come out, in a growth mentality, and come out on top. And then when there is normalcy, you've had the opportunity to be better.
Absolutely.
So, Nicole, you're basically inventorying the financial well-being of a business, the lifeblood of a business. What would your number one, it doesn't have to be number one, but what would you recommend for businesses right now to be able to sustain throughout this?
I think right now, so cash is king right now, keeping cash in the business. And I think you need to have a cash model over the next several weeks, 8, 10, 12 weeks, just to see what else can be coming in. I'm looking with my clients to see how much is left on contracts that we know we have coming in the next few weeks, and let's be realistic, how much of that work can we get finished, and can we bring that in? And then how do we keep it in the business? Everybody is scraping their books right now, right? All of your subcontractors, your suppliers, they're all going back and looking at old invoices. So we're getting invoices from 2019, Q1. Do we really owe them, or can we push those off? And so really walking through of how do we keep cash in the business right now? How can we get more cash in the door? And that's where the PPP loan comes in, to get it in the door. And then what can we delay later on? How can we push payments out? I hate to say it, like the subcontractors, can we push them off? Like, we always want to get everybody paid, but that's just the reality right now.
So basically, to keep as much money in-house and spend as little as possible.
Absolutely, because we don't know how long this is going to last. Is it going to last a couple weeks, or are we talking a few more months? We don't know. So I think just keeping as much in-house as you can.
And what happens if it comes back next spring?
It's a reality.
It's the absolute reality, is that you have to plan for this, that if let's say, Nick, you need to downsize vehicles, all these things, like, is these things that you should be doing now, or should you just be bouncing these ideas around?
Right.
And it's like what we talked about. Like, if you asked me a month ago, it's like, if we have to shut down for a month, do we keep our insurance, or do we just, defer that for a month and then come back online when we're actually active, if we're not active on sites? All these things raced through our head a month ago, and then it changed. Then it was like, oh, how do we adapt to this? And then we keep going. But what other options are there besides the PPP? I was trying to dig it up through my accountant. He sent me one that's basically a $10,000.
Yeah, we chatted about that in the beginning.
You're just going to have to listen to the podcast to find out.
Well, you didn't update
me. So. John's out. EIDL? ED? I forget.
Yeah, and did you apply for both? Or how's it work?
Yeah, so you can apply for the EIDL and the PPP. If the PPP gets funded, that reduces from the EIDL. The PPP has certain criteria on how you can spend it. The EIDL can cover any business cost. The EIDL is a true loan. The PPP, if you're going to use it for payroll, your mortgage, rent, how it's outlined, that will be forgiven. So one is a true loan, one is it's a loan right now, but it can be forgiven, which will turn it into a grant. So there's a couple options there. Under the EIDL, there's also a $10,000 emergency grant that's available under that. We talked about it a little bit earlier. We're not sure how the calculation is happening. They've changed it a couple times this week. So I think we'll still see more changes coming with that $10,000 that you're talking about.
And then there's also the application I read that they had $280 billion available for small businesses, and the application process for that is double what is actually being asked for. And so now the Fed came back and asked for another $250 billion this last week.
I think there's going to be a second round coming. It all hasn't been funded with the first round, but like you said, all the applications are in, and there's more application than what's actually funded. So Wells Fargo, I'm sure you've read about Wells Fargo this week. They're in a world of hurt. They shut down. So start with your local bank. We're having better success with the local regional community banks. They're funding faster than some of the larger banks right now.
And shouldn't we be using banks that we already have relationships with?
Yeah, and some banks are even saying if you don't have a relationship with us, we're not even taking your application.
Right.
So start with your local bank first.
Yeah, John, I was saying when I talked to the bank I work with, they basically have tiers. People that do banking with them and loans get tier 1, just banking tier 2, and you don't bank with us, like that, you're on the bottom of our list for submission.
Well, think about it this way too. When this all lifts, it's funded, the PPP is done. They want your banking relationship. They want your loans. They want your accounts, your deposits. That's how they make their money as their fees. So that's why they're giving priorities to these type of instruments right now.
Yeah.
And I probably missed it, but what do we have to track? I feel like I want to have backup for whatever they ask for if we do get the funding and then we use that funding. What's the best way to track that? Is it just on my bookkeeper and my accountant, or should there be something I should be doing?
That's one way. Another thing we talked about, if you're not disciplined, put it into a separate bank account. Just start a new bank account, put it in there, and just show where it went.
I think the big picture here is obviously these are all reactions to what's going on, but it's also something that is really important to plan for. When we do get through this, is to actually have a plan going forward for if this were to happen again. Or something like this were to happen again. There's always, someone actually wrote us a message about how did you come up with a formula to save 3 months worth of salary?
I did say that, yeah.
And I read that and I'm like, I don't know. It's just kind of one of those
You're
things.
the wrong person to ask.
I am, but I'm all like, but even if I had 3, like I would just be like, someone probably said, hey, 3 months. And I was like, that sounds good. But like I think that's what the big, the big picture here is that actually having a plan for when something like this happens again, we're better prepared.
But let's talk about that. Like I watched AFT do a webinar, something live, and he's like, yeah, we have 6 months of cash reserves for all our employees. And I was like, I love the guy. But at the same time, I was like, that's a ton of money to have holding on to do nothing with.
Right.
Like, I feel like 3 months is comfortable that you have that payment cycle, that it's not too much money to have, that you're not using somewhere else to create money for yourself, but there is some money there that you're comfortable. I guess 3 months to me was that comfort zone where it's like, if I'm using 3 months of people's salary and I don't have anything coming in, I have bigger problems that I shouldn't be floating it for 6 months. In my head. I
talked to someone recently and they recommend 12. I was like, a year? And they were like, yep, that's what we recommend. And I'm sitting, I'm like doing the math. I'm like, where do I put that money?
Into an income property. You right. Take 3 months and have that in your, yeah. And then you can sell the house if you want to, not just have it sit in your account.
Well, the other thing is too, now your profit or your markups are 50%. It's not in the 20-30%. How do you even get to that number? You're going to have huge markups on everything.
Massive.
Well, Nicole, I think we should definitely have you back on, beyond just the COVID. But I appreciate you hopping on real quick here and kind of talking through some of the nuances that we're trying to navigate. And it's clear that it's ever changing. But, big picture, guys, if you are working with someone local or a bookkeeper or an accountant, start with them or your tax person and then your local bank. That's going to be your core group of people. Work with people that you trust to help navigate through some of these situations and then take advantage of the opportunity. And like Nicole said, you can borrow this money, and if you don't use it, you pay it back. But the biggest thing is making sure that you kind of follow the rules and put yourself in a position where you're not going to be dishonest with it, really.
Yeah, and if there's any kids listening to this, you definitely want to go to school, become an accountant. If a pandemic comes back around, you get to work from home. All your meetings are virtual, and you get busier than you ever have been. So it's probably the perfect job right now.
Did you guys talk about, I feel like if I was unemployed, I always wanted to fight to get a job, and I didn't file for unemployment. What about people that right now are still hammering along? I know we're wrapping this up, but hammering along, not getting as much done as they should be getting done, eating away at their profits, small amounts, and they don't realize it. Should those people apply for this loan?
So I think it really varies by business, right? Because the federal unemployment right now is $600 a week for $1,300 or for 13 weeks. So if you look at that amount and then you look at how much you can actually qualify for the PPP, sometimes the unemployment is higher. And maybe it just makes sense to be unemployed for a few weeks, for 13 weeks. What you can do is then if you do apply for the PPP and you come back online, you get funded, go off unemployment. So I think it varies by company of which one makes the most sense for your company. Where can you get the most money into your business right now?
But what about the other part where you're still going about your business, don't really have the need to lay people off? Should you just try and capture this money in case a month from now this changes and we're even worse? Or let's say you're in Nebraska, Mississippi, and it hasn't hit you yet. Should you be applying for this stuff now, even though it's not affecting you?
So with the PPP, you have to use it within 8 weeks. So if you lay off your people and you don't have payroll, it's not going to be forgiven. So it's taking it by company and seeing what makes sense and making those decisions for you. But the next round might be coming, and that's what we talked about earlier. Maybe you don't need it right now and it changes next week and you need it with the next round of funding. Then you apply for it then.
Nicole, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
I know people are going to have questions for you, so where should they be directed?
So they can connect with me on LinkedIn, Nicole Landau, or they can go out to my website, www.landau, Landau, consultingsolutions.com.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Nicole.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys. If you guys like this short little bonus one, let us know. You know where to find us. We'll try to implement some of these in kind of real life scenarios, outside just guests, but, connecting with,
Specialty.
Yeah. That's what I was looking for. Specialty.
Pros.
We'll see you guys next week.
Thank you.
See ya.